My name is Eleanor, though most people in the neighborhood simply call me Granny Ellie. But I wasn't always Granny. Once upon a time, I was just a girl with dreams bigger than the little town where I was born. I wanted to be a nurse. I imagined myself in a white dress, helping people, saving lives, being someone who mattered. I wanted to see the world beyond dusty streets and small houses. But life had its own plans for me. I was barely 18 when I married. My husband, Harold, wasn't wealthy, but he had charm in his smile and ambition in his voice. He told me, "Ellie, we may start with nothing, but together we'll build everything." I believed him. Oh, how deeply I believed him. We didn't build everything. What we built was a small, modest home with creaking floors and thin walls, where love had to fill the empty spaces that money couldn't. And soon, children came. My firstborn son arrived on a winter morning, his tiny cry piercing through the cold. I looked at him, tears rolling down my cheeks, and whispered, "I will give you the world, my boy." That promise became the anthem of my life. I had no gold, no land, no treasures, but I had a mother's love, and love, I thought, could move mountains. As more children came, our home grew louder, messier, but also more alive. Laughter echoed in the halls, little feet ran across the floor, and every corner seemed to hold a memory. But joy does not erase hardship. Harold worked at the factory. Long hours, dangerous conditions. He came home with grease-stained hands and weary eyes, and his pay envelope was never as heavy as we wished it to be. So I worked too. I baked bread and sold it in the mornings. In the afternoons, I took in laundry from wealthier families, scrubbing and wringing until my knuckles bled. At night, I sewed, patching old coats, stitching new dresses. My hands were never still. There were times my fingers cracked so badly that blood stained the fabric. But when I watched my children eat a full meal, their bellies round and satisfied, I told myself the pain didn't matter. I had once dreamed of wearing a nurse's uniform. Instead, I wore aprons stiff with flour and dresses frayed from overuse. But I wasn't bitter. I told myself I was serving in another way, nursing my family's dreams instead of strangers. When money was short, I skipped meals so they wouldn't. In winter, when coats were few, I stitched blankets into makeshift cloaks, making sure the children were warm while I wrapped myself in scraps. I gave up my own warmth, my own comfort, my own hunger, because that is what mothers do. At night, when the day's labor was done and the house finally quiet, I gathered the children by candlelight. We had no proper books, so I wrote words on scraps of paper, teaching them letters and numbers. Education, I told them, is your ticket to a better life. Promise me you'll never waste it. And they promised. Their little voices chimed together, their eyes filled with trust. I believed them. I remembered the day I sold my mother's locket, the only heirloom I had, to pay for my eldest daughter's school fees. My heart ached as I let it go. But when I saw her walk proudly into that classroom, I told myself it was worth it. Every sacrifice felt worth it, because I believed one day, when my children grew into adults, they would remember. They would look at me and say, "Mama, you gave us everything. Now it is our turn to care for you." That belief carried me through countless storms. When Harold fell sick and I had to shoulder the weight of the household alone, I pressed forward. When my body ached, when my youth slipped away too quickly, when my hair grayed before its time, I kept going. "Keep giving, Ellie," I told myself. "One day they will see. One day they will thank you." And so I gave. I gave my youth, I gave my health, I gave my dreams. Piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice, I poured myself into my family like water into thirsty soil.
Never once did I imagine that soil would grow thorns.
Years rolled by like autumn leaves carried by the wind. My children grew tall, their baby faces replaced with sharp features, their laughter turning into deep voices and elegant smiles. I had prayed and worked for their future, and at first it seemed my sacrifices had not been in vain. My eldest, Thomas, became an engineer. I still remember the day he graduated. I wore my old dress, the one I had patched so many times it barely held together, and sat in the crowd, my heart swelling as he received his diploma. When he looked into the audience and found me, his eyes lit up. For that moment, I believed everything I had done had been worth it. My daughters, too, found their places in the world. One became a teacher, the other a nurse, the very dream I had once carried in my heart. How proud I was to see her in the uniform I had imagined for myself. But success has a way of changing people. At first it was small things. They stopped coming home as often. They said they were busy. Work, friends, responsibilities. I understood. After all, they were building their lives. But as the weeks became months and the months stretched into years, the visits grew fewer. My house, once bursting with noise and laughter, grew quieter, emptier. I waited by the window each evening, hoping to see their familiar figures walking down the street. I kept meals warm on the stove, believing someone might arrive hungry, but the plates stayed untouched. Then came the day of true heartbreak. It was Thomas, the boy whose tiny hand had once clung to mine, the boy I had carried on my back when his shoes wore thin, the boy for whom I had sold my only heirloom locket. He arrived one morning, not with warmth in his voice, but with coldness in his eyes. "Mother," he said, avoiding my gaze, "we need to talk." His tone pierced me like a blade. I set down the laundry basket I was carrying and wiped my hands on my apron. "What is it, my son? Are you unwell? Do you need money? I'll find a way." He shook his head impatiently. "It's not that. It's about you." "Me?" I laughed softly, confused. "What about me?" He sighed. "Mother, you're getting old. You can't keep living here alone. It's not safe. It's inconvenient." That word. Inconvenient. I froze. My heart pounded. Inconvenient? Son, this house, this is where you were born. This is the home I built for you, with my hands, with my sweat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We've been discussing it, me, Sarah, and the others. We think it's best if you move into a home, an old age home." The world seemed to tilt under my feet. "An old age home?" My voice cracked. "You want to send me away? After everything? After all I've given?" He interrupted sharply. "Mother, don't make this difficult. We've done our part. You raised us, yes, but we have our own lives now. We can't be tied down." My knees weakened. I gripped the edge of the table, searching his face for mercy, for any flicker of the boy I once knew. "Thomas," I whispered, my eyes brimming with tears. "When you were sick with fever, I stayed awake 3 nights, holding you in my arms, praying you would live. When you had holes in your shoes, I walked barefoot so you could have mine. When you cried for hunger, I gave you my portion of bread. And now I am a burden?" His jaw tightened. "It's not about the past, Mother. It's about the present. You don't understand." No. I understood all too well. The children I had raised, the children I had sacrificed everything for, they no longer saw me as their mother. They saw me as a problem to be solved. The blood in my veins turned to ice. That evening the decision was made. Without my consent, without my heart's agreement, I was packed like a parcel, my belongings crammed into boxes and taken to a place with white walls and unfamiliar faces, an old age home. As the car drove away from the house I had built with Harold, I looked back through the window.
The curtains fluttered in the wind, the garden untended, the door closing, like the final chapter of my life. Tears blurred my vision. I had given them everything, and in return, they gave me abandonment.
The days in the home were long and gray, each morning the same routine. A bell rang, doors opened, and nurses guided us to the dining hall. Rows of faces, lined with wrinkles and heavy with silence, stared into their plates. Some spoke to themselves, others sat in wheelchairs, their eyes fixed on distant memories. I ate quietly, my mind always drifting back to the house I had built, the laughter of children, the warmth of Harold's embrace, the garden that bloomed in spring. Now all that remained was a cold room with a single bed, a nightstand, and a window that overlooked the parking lot. At first, I wept every night. The betrayal cut deep. My children, the very ones I had carried, fed, clothed, and loved, had chosen to cast me aside. I felt discarded, like a worn-out garment no one wished to wear. But pain, I discovered, can be a strange teacher. One evening, as I sat in the courtyard of the home, the sun setting in hues of gold and crimson, a gentle voice broke my thoughts. "May I sit?" I turned and saw a young woman, barely in her 20s, with kind eyes and a notebook in her hands. She was one of the volunteers, students who came to keep us company, though most never stayed long. Her name was Lily. She sat beside me, her presence warm, her smile genuine. She asked me about my life. Unlike others who brushed past, she listened. And for the first time in years, I told my story. From my childhood dreams to my sacrifices, from Harold's early death to the struggles of raising children alone, and finally to the moment of betrayal. Tears rolled down her cheeks as I spoke, and I realized something profound. My story still mattered. The next week, she returned with a small recorder. "Mrs. Eleanor, your story deserves to be heard. Would you allow me to record it? People my age don't understand the sacrifices mothers make. They need to hear." And so I spoke. For hours, I poured my heart into that recorder. My voice cracked, my soul bled. But with every word, I felt lighter. My story was no longer a silent burden. It was becoming a legacy. Weeks turned into months. Lily kept coming, always eager, always attentive. She typed my words into her computer, shaping them into something I never imagined possible: a book. One afternoon, she placed the first printed copy into my trembling hands. On the cover, in bold letters, it read, "They took everything, but not my soul. The story of Eleanor." I clutched it to my chest, tears spilling freely. For the first time since Harold's passing, I felt alive again. But life has a way of circling back. News of the book spread quickly in town. A local paper wrote about it, then a radio station invited me to speak. People who had never known my name began to call me the Mother of Strength. And then my children found out. One cold winter afternoon, the home's front doors opened, and in walked Thomas. His face, once filled with arrogance, now carried unease. "Mother," he whispered, lowering his head. I read your book." I looked at him, my heart no longer heavy with desperation, but steady with resolution. He fumbled with his hands. "I didn't realize all that you gave up. I didn't see. I was blind. And now the whole world knows the truth I refuse to face." Silence stretched between us. Once I would have longed for this moment, to hear an apology, to feel his embrace. But now I realize something. I didn't need his validation anymore. I had found my voice, my worth, my dignity.
Thomas, I said gently, my voice firm, I forgave you long ago, but forgiveness does not erase the choices you made. You left me when I needed you most, and now I have learned to stand without you. His eyes filled with tears. Mother, please, can you come back home? I shook my head slowly. Home is not a building, Thomas. Home is love, respect, and trust, and those are things I will no longer beg for. He wept quietly, and though part of me grieved for the boy I once carried in my arms, I knew this was the closure I needed. The world had taken my years, my health, my comforts. My children had taken my house, my peace, my security. But none of them had taken my soul. I was Eleanor, a mother, a fighter, a woman whose story would outlive betrayal. And as the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, I smiled for the first time in years, knowing I had finally risen above.
Months passed since the day Thomas walked into the home asking me to return. I had refused then, not out of spite, but because I had finally understood something that took me a lifetime to learn. A woman's worth is not measured by how much she endures, but by how much she chooses to honor herself. Life inside the home was no longer a prison for me. With Lily's help, my book had reached more people than I ever imagined. Letters poured in, strangers writing to thank me, young mothers telling me they would never again take their parents for granted, even grown children admitting that they called their mothers after reading my words. Each letter was a thread, weaving my pain into a tapestry of purpose. One evening, as I sat in the garden with Lily, she read aloud a message from a woman in another country. Dear Eleanor, I am sitting by my mother's hospital bed as I write this. We have not spoken in years, but after reading your story, I reached for her hand today. She opened her eyes and smiled. You gave us back what pride and anger had stolen. Thank you. I closed my eyes, and tears slipped down my cheeks, not of sorrow this time, but of peace. My suffering had become a bridge for others. My wounds had become lanterns lighting someone else's dark path. And that, I realized, was my true victory. One quiet morning, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, I felt a stillness within me. My hands, frail and trembling, rested on the book that bore my name. I whispered Harold's name, thinking of the man who once held my heart, and smiled. I knew my time was near, but I was not afraid. For I had already lived my second life, the life of dignity, of truth, of leaving behind a legacy that no betrayal could erase. When the nurses found me, I was still smiling, the book resting against my chest. And though my children would one day stand over my grave, perhaps with regret in their hearts, I would not be there to carry their burden. I had already risen, far beyond pain, into the embrace of eternity. My story would live on, my name would live on, and above all, my soul would remain untouchable.